highly transmissible Omicron variant 511, that is B11529. And of course, I do have Professor Samuel Majalija. He is from the School of Biosecurity, Biotechnical and also Biolaboratory Science in the College of Veterinary Medicine, Animal Resources and also Biosecurity. He's joining us right now to talk about this and a lot more. A very good morning, Mr. Samuel Majalija.
Good morning, viewers and listeners.
Indeed.
My name is Professor Samuel Majalija. I'm currently the Deputy Principal of the College of Veterinary Medicine, Animal Resources and Biosecurity of Macquarie University.
And indeed. So we are here to talk about how best we can ensure that our learners are kept safe in the school environment as we actually clamor for the reopening. How best do you want this to be expedited? How do you actually fall into this campaign working with the Uganda National Students Association?
Thank you very much. Besides the general support and leadership of the Ministry of Health, the Uganda National Students Association also is championing and supporting this effort. And one of the things they are working with different stakeholders to ensure that our schools remain open. And they have dubbed the campaign saying schools must stay safe and open without closing because of COVID. And they approached us as a university and as a college because we are leaders in training and supporting laboratory detection of COVID. So they came to us and said, what can you do with us? And we agreed that we shall work with them to do one of the sectors of capacity building. So the idea is we want to have a backup force which can support detection of COVID in this country. And our target is having 2,000 trained laboratory people to detect this COVID.
2,000?
2,000. And using what they call antigen rapid detection kits.
That is for the younger ones? And then PCR tests for the older ones?
Not necessarily. Normally, the gold standard for testing COVID right now is PCR. But not every place has PCR. So if there are signs of a disease in a community or in a school, they can be tested initially using an antigen detection kit.
Indeed.
So they are saying that if we can equip people with skill and specifically lab-trained students who have completed their final years.
Indeed, but haven't been deployed.
And they have that capacity, they can be deployed to support the Ministry of Health.
I can see you're also looking for 1,000 IT. You actually secured them already. IT personnel, these are volunteers, students.
Yeah, but mainly for us, we are looking at basically at the lab component of that.
Indeed.
Yes.
Now, Mr. Majalija, let's talk about COVID-19 as it is. We've heard from epidemiologists in South Africa, University of Warwick, within the United Kingdom. Then we'd like to hear from our researchers right here in Uganda.
Yes.
How do you know this disease? According to your research, what have you found out about the coronavirus disease? Because we do get information that the hypothesis is that it jumped from an animal to a human being. That is the hypothesis coming in from the Chinese government. But then you did have Donald Trump at some point. You did have some people within the Republican circles and even some Democrats saying maybe this was a lab leak within the jurisdiction of Wuhan within China. According to your research,
yes,
what did you find out?
I want to first talk about these diseases. Normally, a disease has its natural host where it resides and gets used that
for
host
years.
For years. And when disease is the natural host, it doesn't cause severe disease for too long.
So the host gets used to being with the disease. I see.
But when a disease jumps from the natural host into what we call an unnatural host, it comes with aggression. This has been seen with HIV, has been seen with Marburg, with Ebola, and the COVID. Specifically for COVID, the coronavirus is not new on the globe or in viruses. It has been here for generations. We have them in animals. But specifically coronavirus has that capacity to mutate and change. It has capacity to pick segments of its virus. That's why before you came even to this current COVID-19, we had what we call severe acute respiratory syndrome, SARS, which was corona itself. And it picked segments of the virus from different hosts and assembled them and became severe.
Around 2008, 2009.
Yes. And actually, from all the studies we were making, there was a prediction that another one would come up.
And of course, even before the SARS outbreak, there was one in 1912. You remember that encounter? Over 500 million deaths had been registered.
That is
500 million infections and 50 million deaths.
Yes, that was not influenza.
Yes.
Actually, when you're looking at about viruses which are going to cause severe disease in the world, they are all respiratory in nature.
And they're connected.
And they are not necessarily related, but
as far as mutations are concerned.
Yes. The influenza virus is a severe group of viruses which can still cause pandemics in the world. The coronavirus is another one because they highly mutate and jump from one host to another. And that's why you have this. Theoretically, there are two hypotheses. The most novel one is this virus could have been in the environment, in the animals. It picked segments from the animals and combined with the human one and jumped out the human host who had never had it and have become severe. That is the most novel explanation.
What about the hypothesis that this was a leak from a lab in Wuhan in the Chinese territory? Do you buy into that?
That remains a hypothesis which requires further investigation to come out many years from now. I wouldn't go with that one.
And of course the Chinese are pushing back. The World Health Organization entered the Chinese territory. They went to that lab in Wuhan and many other territories to ascertain whether or not it is true it jumped from an animal to a human. But it was inconclusive because they said they were not given leeway to go into many of the jurisdictions they wanted to go to ably expedite the investigation. Now they wanted to go back a second time, and the Chinese said, please stop there. If you didn't find anything the first time, don't come back the second time.
Yeah.
Meaning they could have been hiding something.
Yeah, that's
yeah. You want to add on to that?
No, of course that is a highly political and a global issue which you don't just enter into.
Indeed.
And I wouldn't go for that transfer now.
Indeed.
Yes.
Now, this COVID-19 disease is highly transmissible and it's mutating so fast based on what we were seeing in the previous, coronaviruses.
Yes.
Why is it that way?
It is the makeup of the virus itself. When you look at the structure of the virus, there are two segments. The conserved region, which does not change, and the segment which keeps changing and picking other parts.
I see.
Now, for a disease to occur, it is that part of the virus which keeps changing, which causes disease. So if that part mutates and changes, it can change to a more severe disease-causing or a less disease-causing. In South Korea, that over the years, it could mutate to a less disease-causing virus. And I'm sure it will happen now after many what we call passages passing through human beings for a long time to eventually become less severe.
You know, when I was reading research about the influenza in 1912 all the way to 1918 around the First World War, and it was exacerbated by the same, the soldiers moving from one place to another, unsanitary conditions, so it spread like wildfire. Over 500 million cases were registered. And of course, at the beginning of the pandemic, I couldn't fathom a situation that at some point we would be talking about 298 million of these cases, even here in this day and age. So, Ebley, how do we ensure that we protect our learners when they get back into the school system, largely owed to the fact that we are reopening during an explosion of COVID-19 cases owed to the Omicron variant? How do you ensure protection to these learners in that setting?
Yeah, to start with, certainly we're going to have learners, over almost 18 million learners going back to school.
Plus the kindergarteners.
They are coming from communities where there is still a virus.
I hear you.
So, like it or not, we shall have viruses coming with the learners. And they're going to congregate in large numbers.
I agree.
And so, as a start, let us not say there will not be virus. There will be virus in schools.
What do we do?
So what do we do is the question. Among the things we're supposed to do is detecting the signs of the disease. So every learner should be able to know that when there is headache, there is fever, there is flu, there is weakness.
Sore throat.
They are likelihood to have COVID. So this should go through all the learners, all the teachers and everybody in the school. And two, the first thing is reporting as quickly as possible. So there has to be a system which is strong to report. And that's why the UNSA is coming and saying, we have a structure of our students in every school. Let's also use them to support this. So that when the students are sick in the dormitories, they may not tell the teacher, but they can inform their fellow students. And this can be communicated immediately to the school administration. That is the first thing. Once the signs are on, before you confirm, they must be tested. And I think that's why it's important as a country to support the testing of those who have got the sign of the disease with this antigen testing.
Of course, the platform during our preamble, this was our main point of messaging to the central government. Ensure that you embark on complete testing of high-risk populations. But then we are seeing money put onto this testing. And of course, it's going to dampen the resolve of detecting and finding out who has the disease and who needs a lot of help. So should they be free, the testing?
It doesn't have to be free because there's money costing. But I think there needs support both by government and also partners to ensure that actually in all across the country, besides the PCR, there's also support for testing with antigen detection kits, which should be readily available as the first line of detecting the disease. And
as the learners go back to school, at the entrance, shouldn't we be testing of every school?
I've seen government saying they should not do that, but I think it should have been a very good idea to know, as we start with 2,000 children, what is our current state.
Indeed.
It would be disastrous to have 20 students who have got COVID in a population and then they spread the disease.
In a week, everyone is infected.
So you'd rather try and understand that as we are introducing this population, what is our stand? To me, it would have been very easy and very positive, so that we know we are starting with a fairly clean population and we can detect and control the spread. But now that if we don't test anything, it's likely that there will be introduction of the disease in the population and it will be explosive.
And they're also blocking unvaccinated teachers, unvaccinated learners, and so forth, even the support staff. Shouldn't it be more feasible to have vaccination centers set up at the entrance of every school to ensure if I have never been vaccinated, at least I receive my jab as I'm entering the school premises, and then maybe 2 weeks later, if I'm doing Pfizer, or 3 weeks later, I get my second jab?
Yeah, I think it's also a good idea to combine both of them. As we are reporting to schools, the teachers should also be vaccinated and the support staff, so that you are combining the two, you're increasing on coverage of vaccination as well as protecting our children, other than just saying don't come to the school unless immunized. So I agree it should be one of the things we should be doing.
Go ahead. What else should we be doing?
We also need more education
on the disease.
On the disease for every learner. They should be able to be supported to know all this. And we also need to include more other stakeholders. You know, as the UNICEF is working, they've identified, you know, in a school, there are these small Christian union organizations. There are Mothers Union, Fathers Union. There are Scouts, Guides and Guides, all who support and control. They work with schools already. So these are simple structures which can also be activated and supported and worked with to ensure schools remain safe. You know, schools live in the communities. So we must engage and involve everybody so that there is actual support. Our children get the disease, there is isolation, there is psychological torture, and the teachers are not enough to counsel our children.
Indeed.
But they are Mothers Union, they are Fathers Union, they are the Muslim community associations. They should all be involved in this, so that at the end of the day, you are having a support system for our children who are in the school.
What is the worst case scenario that you're actually envisaging as Macquarie University, according to your research, with the explosion of these cases and also the reopening taking center stage? What are you most worried about?
My worry is, as learners are coming, they will come with a disease.
Indeed.
And it is likely that there will be many cases happening concurrently. And the worst will be is closing the schools again because of the high positivity cases, which should be avoided. And the only way to avoid them is to test them early enough and ensure those who are positive are isolated and treated. But the school should remain running. So I wouldn't want to see a scenario whereby we've closed our schools again because of COVID. I would love to see a scenario where the schools, although we have had positive cases, we have managed to overcome them and the learning is going on. My fear right now is we have lost 2 years. It's not only learners. We've lost 2 years of human development for the nation. That gap will never be filled for the next 30 or 40 years because you have lost 2 years of training of human resource power. So we must not lose another month or year. We must ensure there is constant training, surveillance, and system in place so that the future of our children is guaranteed.
And of course, they say, the Uganda National Students Association, if we continue with these disruptions, yes, the gap will increase. We shall lose over 20 years of the gains we had achieved as a country. Of course, 20 years. We shall be undoing all those gains if we continue disrupting education, lockdown, and then we are reopening, and then another lockdown, and then reopen again. We are undoing all those gains we've actually achieved in the last, not 10 or 15, no, 20 whooping years in that regard. What are some of the mistakes we made the last time? Remember, we were in that lockdown, March of 2020. We reopened around August for the first time. And then we did close again because there was an explosion. Schools couldn't actually expedite SOPs. Then we opened again, and then we closed another time. So talk to us about that. What did we do wrong the last two times?
We were just learning. You know, disease investigation and control is a very hard game.
Indeed.
This is the first time in the history of mankind to have what called a pandemic. I have been teaching about pandemics for the last 5 years. I had never seen one. So all of us were learning. We're all students. So really, there are no specific mistakes we made. We've been learning. But certainly, we can do better now that we have learned. You see, one of the things we did, of course, was we did not have enough support to detect the disease in schools. So the disease spread within schools and was not detected. And also even outside schools, people were complacent as a population. So there has been spread of disease. And when we closed the schools abruptly, remember, there was a sudden explosion. Because schools closed, there was panic. Students and parents ran, picked their children. They moved with the disease from schools into the communities. So we had an explosion of disease because the parents picked the disease from schools, took it to their homes and to the communities. That should never happen again. We should never close schools because there is COVID in schools.
I hear you.
We should be able to contain the COVID within the school's environment.
The $64,000 question is how? Mr. Majak.
We have already known that COVID, although it causes a disease in children, it's not as severe as adults. So children can be treated and handled with minimum support.
I'm also seeing some of these other countries, the US, Israel, talking about COVID-19 vaccinations for the younger ones from the age of 5 all the way to 12, and those ones from the age of 12 all the way to 16. President Museveni is saying he's not vaccinating those under the age of 18. Should we also move down that road? Should we tread down that path where we vaccinate the younger ones too, with maybe Pfizer?
I think in Uganda, if you look at the records we have, the mortality and the severe disease among children has been very low.
Indeed.
So for the time being, we have a big population which is susceptible. Let's first deal with it. Those who are 18 and above, actually what we should be doing now is making it compulsory so that everybody is immunized.
Indeed.
When that population is finished, then we can go to the next phase. But as for now, the priority for the country is immunize those who are 18 and above, protect our children in the environment they're in, keep them in schools, and if there's sickness, ensure that every school has enough isolation facility and medical support to give that supportive treatment. Unless the disease has become very severe, that's when they can move in the major hospitals. But the schools can still continue running, because even if you come back home, the treatment is almost the same. Unless it's severe, that's when they're in school, in the hospitals. So we must have the home-based treatment care in schools for our children so that they remain in that environment and don't spread the disease further to the communities.
We are talking about schools that are not going to be reopening because of the financial distress, many of which are going to reopen, but buildings are going to be dilapidated. Many of these schools, private, have not expanded to accommodate the standard operating procedures. Aren't you worried that many of these private institutions, if you will, and some government might not be able to put in place isolation centers that will go a long way in keeping away COVID-19 suspected cases?
Well, that's one of the things the Minister of Health, I think, is doing in education, to go in and supervise and see the readiness of schools. And I'm sure there's going to be a report that schools are ready to receive students. The readiness has markers and indicators. One of them should be, are you able to have SOP in place? And among the SOPs, do you have a facility for isolation of the sick?
Indeed.
That should be part and parcel of every institution which is called a school. Otherwise, there will be no reason why you have a school and you cannot isolate those who are sick, especially right now. So I would request all those school proprietors and owners to think and plan for that as well as part and parcel of protecting our students and the school by having a place or an isolation unit where they can be isolated from.
Go ahead.
We are still talking as a college. We are ready to support this endeavor of training our students. We are looking at skilling all students who have finished their first degree, their diploma or certificate, initially in lab across the country, to give them the skill of how you can carry out good biosafety, preventing infection from coming to you, how you can do a good test using this kit, how you can do the entire process as a student, and you can qualify to be used to test COVID using this rapid kit. And this we want to train our Ugandans so that we can have a pool of at least 2,000 trained young Ugandans available to be called upon to support in case there is need for this.
Indeed.
That is going to be a contribution as a university and also as UNSA. And I'm glad that actually the students are coming up to think like this. This is a positive attitude which I think should be promoted and worked on. I call upon partners because the training requires a lot of support. In it we are now doing voluntary training. Actually, our trainers are doing voluntary work. The trainers are doing voluntary work. And they are very happy. So far we have trained almost 200 students, the first lot. But you're going to continue training, and students are coming up and asking us to train more students.
Professor Majalija, you've been doing a lot of research around this coronavirus, and we do have many of our citizens who are watching this show. They hear many of the officials say, please go and get vaccinated, but then they also hear reports coming in from the US. They hear reports coming in from Russia, Israel, and also Nicaragua, if you will. And these reports indicate that people whom had gotten vaccinated before are also getting infected with this COVID-19 disease. So, Ebley, try to explain to the viewer why they should get vaccinated and why those who are not vaccinated are adversely affected by the disease and not those ones who have received a jab at least.
You know, if you look at the figures, those who are vaccinated, they are majorly protected. But as you know, even if you're vaccinated in any vaccine, it's never 100%.
Indeed.
So there is a population which is called a naive. It may still get the disease. But the fact is, one, when you're vaccinated, your body mounts what we call an immune response, which is an attack force of soldiers.
Indeed.
Should you get the infection, you would have what you have first line of defense. The disease is less severe. So in other words, instead of getting pneumonia and falling down, you have a mild infection compared to those who are not vaccinated. So why I encourage vaccination is you have the first protection. What now the thing is you can even boost yourself with the second and the third one.
And the fourth
and the fourth one, which is normal. Don't tire, because the more protected you are, the less severe you'll get and the safer you'll be compared to one who is not immunized at all. So there is still a positive result in immunization. Those figures you see and the reports you hear, it's not everybody. Those are a few cases which are always there. So
please tell them that shouldn't be a precursor for them not getting vaccinated.
Yes, one is these vaccines are fairly safe. They are protective. And you are better off having a vaccine than not having a vaccine.
Indeed.
So I would encourage all Ugandans, those who are within the age bracket, please get the vaccine. You'll be more protected than those who are not. So I encourage you to go for immunization. I know teachers are scared. Please go and get the vaccine. It doesn't cause sterilization as they think.
Indeed.
It doesn't. That's not one of the issues.
It doesn't cause infertility.
It doesn't cause infertility. So please, you are safe. You'll produce your children.
What other misconceptions have you heard about this vaccine?
One of them is population control.
There you go.
Which is for Africa.
Indeed.
And that's the core, that they want to disseminate the African population.
And funny as it may sound, people are buying into it. And that's why we need to continue ramping up with this information dissemination to alleviate all these misconceptions, I'm telling you. But the latest we are getting right here on Morning at NTV, we actually do know that the Pfizer vaccine is actually effective. According to the researchers, epidemiologists, if you will, within the US, they are telling us that between the ages of 12 and also 16 years, Pfizer is 100% effective. And for those young children between the ages of 5 and 11, it's only 91% effective. And for those who are 18 and above, it is also 91% effective. So you do not have any excuse not to go and get vaccinated. You, as a vaccinated individual, you have better chances of protection, but that person who has never gotten a jab, they'll be adversely affected by this COVID-19 disease, and they'll continue spreading it, and they'll also succumb as others do the same too. So please, let's exercise caution. I do have Professor Majalija within my midst, and we are still talking about how best we can ensure that our learners are safe and protected within the education system, if you will. Countries like Israel, Professor, countries like the US are now changing their, how do you say, COVID-19 guidelines. They're changing their COVID-19 SOPs. They're also changing their, many of the policies surrounding COVID-19. Now they're not instituting lockdowns, irrespective of the infections. They're saying, for us as Israel, we're not going to focus on how many cases we are registering in a day. We are going to focus on the high-risk populations. Where are the elderly living? They go there. They test the elderly. If you're presenting some milder symptoms, they give you some kind of help. Even the vaccinated are being tested to see who got reinfected so that they can be treated for those milder symptoms. Can we also copy that same model to also ensure that we do not expedite any more lockdowns, but instead we target those vulnerable populations with testing and also give them the medicine that they actually clamor for?
Yes, after 2 years of lockdown, I also support the issue. We don't need another lockdown. We should now have strategies of how to keep the population safe. As you've said, who are those most vulnerable? So we must look at now the kind of procedures. How do we ensure that we reduce the vulnerability of populations? So as a national task force, they should be thinking, what are the new approaches? The first one was to stop the disease from spreading.
Indeed.
Now we know the disease is going to live with us. We cannot stop it anymore.
Indeed.
It's in the community, it's in everybody. So how do we minimize its damage on the population is the strategy you're going to make.
Indeed.
And that should be the focus of the Ministry of Health and Education. How do we minimize the damage of the disease on the health, on the economy? By the way, if you look at this current health system we have, which is very good.
Yes, Professor.
It is overstretched. I always think through, you look at it from this way. You've got 18 million learners.
Indeed.
And they all need health service and support. The parent ministry, which is Ministry of Health, has a very thin structure which supports health.
Indeed.
So they must run out to the Ministry of Health for support. But let's copy other examples. Look at the military. They have the health system in the military, which is very strong.
I've seen the US calling the National Guard and the Army to help with COVID-19
The prisons
responses.
have got their prison health system. But education, which has got 18 million people, has no health support system.
That's a good one.
So to me, I would look at now that we're having these issues coming now and in the future, can we think of having a strong health system of education?
For the 18 million learners?
Yes, in this country.
Specifically?
Yes. So that we know now that when we get sick,
this is where we run to.
There's an educational system which is supporting that. That's an idea to discuss in the future, but to me, it makes more sense. Because we've been using the traditional system because there was no emergencies and big epidemics. But now the entire population of 18 million people are at risk.
But is it feasible, Professor Majalija? We are talking about the creation of a special unit that is going to be caring for the 18 million learners. That would call for, more people being hired into the health system and so forth to actually, cover this unit. But then we are also talking about striking nurses. We are talking about striking interns. People who are striking here and there. So there is no money. Is it feasible?
Well, those are issues which can be discussed in the future. But
Indeed.
You see, if you're going to avert this calamity, it's now a new normal, which has never happened before.
Ideally, our priority should only be combating this pandemic.
Yes, because we've never had schools closing for 2 years.
Indeed.
We've never had saying that children are going to fall sick at the same time. This is a new thing. You'll have a population of the children falling sick and the other outside also falling sick. But you have the same structure and system.
Indeed.
How are we going to handle that one? So we must think through. I mean, what's happening is COVID is asking us to think outside the box.
Indeed.
Do we have any new ideas to come with? The answer is yes. We must now be thinking and churning new ideas, how we can combat these things and in a new way. So to me, I think it's high time we'll have to think outside the traditional way to think of new approaches. That's why you see Israel is doing it their way. They are looking at the vulnerable populations and they are targeting that. That has not been in the traditional system we're using. So we are learning every day new things.
Go ahead.
So even now, that's why I still support these students and I'm happy to work with them because they are saying they have a role to play. They are students, they exist in every institution. They have the structures in school. So they can be part and parcel of disease detection, of disease reporting into the structure which is existing. And they should be empowered.
And of course, UNSA, Uganda National Students Association, is doing some really great work. They are appealing to the Ministry of Health that upon the resumption of our studies or learning, those schools that actually register COVID-19 cases shouldn't be shut down. They shouldn't be penalized for reporting COVID-19 cases because many schools might decide to hide this information. That is one of the mistakes we made before. Am I right, Professor Majali?
Yes, you are. That's the thing. We should not shut a school down because they have got COVID-19. But rather we should isolate those who have the disease.
Indeed.
Test the other group which has been exposed, and if they don't have the disease, they continue learning. And that should be the way to go. In that way, schools will be able to report and say, actually, we have got signs of COVID, come and support us. Remove the learners who have the signs. If they are sick, treat them, but let the others continue learning. In that way, the school system will continue running and we shall move further. And that's why I support the current proposal by UNICEF that actually the schools should not be shut down because there is COVID. And that will encourage more reporting. In fact, what happened last time is most of these schools did not report because they feared to be closed down. And that was the time, that was the system we had at that time. Once there's COVID, shut the school. But now you're saying no. If there's COVID, continue learning, but all those who are sick should be isolated and removed from the environment. And that will sustain our education system, sustain the learning system, will also improve on disease detection, reporting, and also control. And also teach us more lessons. In that way, we'll have all schools running concurrently. What the school needs is more support. I think there's been more need for more support in these schools. I've seen they've put a structure for teachers who are going to be trained, but these teachers have other roles to play. They are teaching, so they are also busy with the teaching work. So a school will need an additional support to ensure that they're able to carry out these surveillance regularly and report. And the ministry should also actually, it has to be very, very vigilant in this. And I'm sure, and I'm happy that the students are coming saying we are going to have support and help you. The mothers are saying we are going to work with you. So all these stakeholders should get involved so that at the end of the day, COVID belongs to all of us, the school, the ministry, and the parents and the community. So all people are involved to help and minimize that impact. That is it.
Well, of course, the government is coming out and they're saying they're not going to accord any financial help to the private institutions. Is this a cause of worry because many of them are going to be unable to expand their premises to accommodate the SOPs? Is this a cause of worry? Because we already know the private teachers will be receiving some 100,000 Uganda shillings. That is for them as individuals. But then the schools, as a whole setting, they didn't get any capitation grants to help them with expanding their premises. Paying for the government the worst case scenario that will happen when COVID-19 surveillance is not put in place, when rapid testing is not put in place, when sports of hygiene are not put in place to ensure hand washing and so forth. Please engage us.
Certainly there's going to be a lot of straining on the schools, especially private, all schools. COVID control and prevention is very expensive, as you will understand. These sanitizers for daily use for a school of 1,000 students is a very big cost, which is higher than the fees they're paying.
Yes.
So really there is a very big burden on the schools to ensure that they have the SOPs, they have the infrastructure and the system in place. It is a challenge which they are facing, but these are businessmen and people. So I do not know what government is thinking about it, but it requires support. Whether the government will give the support, I'm not sure, but it's something which needs to be considered because private schools were not designed control emergencies like this. When they were designing the school themselves, they did not take consideration to, in case there are emergencies like this in schools, it was not there. In their budget, they did not budget for supporting these cases of COVID. So it's an additional cost. Unfortunately, it's coming at the time when we've been closed for 2 years. The schools are now going to be open. Many of them actually are not in a very good structure and shape.
Yeah.
So that requires money to put them back. And the time is very short. From the time that it was announced, it's only 2 weeks. So most schools, I'm not sure how prepared they are for that opening and to ensure we are safe. So it's a challenge, but they are businessmen and women. So really, that's their business.
Professor Majalija, we do have some information largely on the COVID-19 disease, but then there is little to no information around the Omicron variant, about its severity especially. We do know that it's highly transmissible, it spreads like wildfire, but we do not know its severity, how many people it's going to be killing on a daily basis, weekly, monthly, or yearly basis, if you will. And of course, many of my citizens have been talking. Whenever someone says, well, COVID-19, Omicron, they say, no, those are just milder infections. They are not actually causing any worry. But largely what we've seen is Omicron largely transparent among young people. Yes, young populations, but we do not know how it acts among older populations, 50 and above. What do you make of that?
Yeah, from
how it behaves.
Yes, from onset, you see, you can easily predict a disease. Like Delta, it didn't have bit of the Delta was severe.
Indeed.
You'd only see from number of admissions in hospitals.
It brought about our second wave.
A number of deaths.
April.
So Omicron has so far been here, I think, for now 3 weeks or more.
Around November.
Around November. But globally, much as there was the fear of Omicron, but overall there have been very minimal admissions.
Hospitalizations in the ICU.
That tells you that although it is a disease, it doesn't require hospitalization. Now that there are few severe cases of Omicron overall.
But we've seen so many hospital cases going up. People going to these centers to seek medical help for the mild symptoms.
Precisely. Yes. There are two explanations. One, in those countries, those populations are immunized. So I can comfortably say those people who have been exposed to Omicron actually have prior protection because they've been immunized.
I see.
Compared to us here, we're not
the African population.
We are not sure yet what will happen because all those populations have been immunized, so the disease has been mild. Now it is coming to us here, but fortunately, so far, we've not had so much very severe disease, but it's a disease which is spreading very fast, and it could still cause a severe disease. So my advice to everybody is, the SOPs are still very, very, very important.
The 2 meters between you and the outsiders of your home.
The mask is the first thing. The 2 meters. The washing and sanitizing of your hands as the minimum. That should be there for everybody at all times. And that will minimize and stop the spread. And that should be promoted by all.
Professor Majalija, thank you very much for coming through. He's from the College of Veterinary Medicine, Animal Resources, and also Biosecurity. Thank you very much for coming through and engaging us on this very pertinent issue. Your last parting shots to the viewers who are watching, the parents, the learners, the teachers who are saying, I will not get that jab. No, I've heard so many things about that. I'm not going to get vaccinated. The learners who are saying, my immunity is way up there. I do not need to get a jab, and so forth. Talk to them before I let you go.
Thank you very much to all the viewers. If you're 18 and above, I urge you and honestly do, please go and get the first shot and also get the second shot. You need that protection. Protecting yourself and also the community you're in. Much as there could be issues, that your safety is better with the vaccine than not with the vaccine. I took the shot myself.
Indeed.
And so is my family, my wife did it.
Amazing.
And we've not had any.
And you are in great shape, Professor Majalija Samuel. Thank you for coming through from the School of Biosecurity, also Biotechnical and Laboratory Science in the College of Veterinary Medicine, Animal Resources and Biosecurity. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure interacting with you. Looking forward to our next encounter.
Thank you very much, and have a good day.
Amazing. And of course, you're still watching Morning at NTV. Well, we still do have a lot more in store for you. Let's take a break. We'll be right back shortly. Keep it here.
1.5 billion shillings in cash prizes up for grabs.
My name is Mulage Sahod from Tororo District. I'm so happy that I'm